Tea started with the silence after the door clicked shut. Not the usual quiet of a house settling into evening, but a vacant stillness that made me glance toward the sunroom, the one Alyssa kept locked since her painting awakening. I was restoring a chipped Corinthian capital that afternoon, a commission from a local church. My hands were covered in fine dust, the scent of aged plaster clinging to my sleeves. For years, I've lived in the rhythm of repairs, finding beauty in what others call broken. But lately, I couldn't help wondering if something inside our home was crumbling while I studied stone. Alyssa had taken up art lessons 6 months ago. At first, I was proud. After the museum let her go, she floundered. The classes gave her purpose again, color in her voice. But something shifted. She began staying later, claiming studio critiques ran over. Her phone never left her pocket. She started locking the sunroom. And then, last Thursday, while reaching for a mug above the stove, I knocked a stack of gardening books off the shelf. As I gathered them, a small receipt fluttered to the floor, stiff, textured paper, folded twice. It was from a boutique art supplier 2 towns over. A full list of premium oils, fine canvas rolls, and a custom-made easel. The total could have covered our utility bill. But Alyssa had said she sold her old easel weeks ago. Said she didn't need it anymore. I didn't confront her. I don't operate on suspicion. I need texture, contrast, proof. So I mentioned it casually over lunch with Lenny, my colleague and longtime friend. We were seated outside a deli, sun creeping through the lattice. She said she doesn't use an easel anymore, I said, handing him the receipt. Lenny studied it, then looked up. Artists don't hide their best tools, Nathan, unless they're making something not meant to be seen. That stayed with me. Over the next few days, I noticed the details. Her brushes were never rinsed in our sink. Her hands bore no trace of pigment. Yet every time I passed the sunroom, I could sense a hum behind the linen curtain windows. Not a sound, exactly, but the weight of something happening. Something deliberate. I tried to push the doubt away. Reassured myself that distance didn't always mean danger. But memory complicates things. Just 5 years ago, she would show me every sketch, every line, every mistake. We used to sit in the courtyard drinking sweet tea while she described each piece like it was a story only she could tell. Now, I couldn't remember the last time she spoke about her work. One night, I stayed up late at the workbench. Rain tapped against the tall windows. I sipped coffee gone bitter from the hour and turned toward the hallway. The sunroom door stood still, but I imagined her beyond it. Not painting, but hiding. Not from me, maybe, but from something she didn't want me to touch. And then came the sound. A soft thump, like a canvas being set upright. Then quiet footsteps moving away from the door. I didn't move. Just listened, heart steady but jaw tight. Not fear, not even anger. Just the cold edge of disconnection. The next morning, I walked past the sunroom. The curtains were pulled tighter than usual. That night, I dreamed of marble hands, delicate, crumbling, slipping through mine before I could patch the fractured. The following evening, as I cleared out an old cabinet, I came across Alyssa's old sketchbook wedged behind a row of household manuals. It had a new page added, one that wasn't hers. A loose sheet in unfamiliar handwriting that simply read, "You see her with your eyes. I see her with my hands." The air inside the townhouse that afternoon was unnaturally still. I hadn't meant to snoop. I truly hadn't. But Alyssa's keys were still on the hook, and her car was gone again. A pattern was forming. She'd disappear in the middle of the day, her absence wrapped in vague mentions of meeting a friend or clearing her head. I never asked who. I think deep down I already knew. I had just come in from finishing a limestone polish on the back terrace when I noticed the studio door ajar. Not wide open, just enough to whisper carelessness. Alyssa was usually meticulous about that door. The sunroom had always been her corner. A converted glass enclosure, it had once been our favorite place for Sunday coffee. Now it was veiled off with linen curtains, always closed. No sounds, no movement, just a silence that had grown territorial. I stepped in slowly, not sure whether I was violating something sacred or finally reclaiming something mine. The smell hit me first, not like before. No oil paints, no fresh canvas. Instead, the faint trace of something sweet and metallic, like blood mixed with perfume. I hesitated. Then I saw the sketchbook lying open on the edge of the stool, pages fluttering under the ceiling fan's uneven pulse. It wasn't just drawings. There were captions. Each page contained charcoal sketches of a man. The same man, never fully revealed, always half-turned, faceless, clothed in shadows. But the notes underneath were unmistakably hers. Words like "again, he saw me," or the way he said my name like it was his. I didn't know what burned more, the lines she'd drawn or the way she wrote about him like he knew her in ways I didn't anymore. On the window ledge, tucked beneath a paperweight we bought in Savannah years ago, was an envelope with the Community Studios logo. Inside, a gallery submission form, but the co-artist's name wasn't Alyssa. It was A. Rinsley and R.G. R.G., two initials that pulled something loose in me. Rinsley, that was Alyssa's maiden name. And R.G., that wasn't just anyone. That was Rowan Graff, her former intern, the grad student she once mentored at the museum. He had dinner at our table. He toasted our anniversary. I sat down on the old bench in the corner, next to the half-finished bust I'd carved for our 5th year. It had once sat in the foyer. She must have moved it here, out of sight. For a long moment, I didn't move. My hands rested on my knees, still dusty from stonework. One palm curled inward. I hadn't realized I'd clenched it. The laptop on her desk was still open. Not locked. I knew I shouldn't have, but I did. Her email was open to a draft folder. The message read only. "If he finds out, I'll say the work was therapeutic. You always said truth and beauty could coexist. Let's hope he still believes in both." No attachments. No subject line. No signature. Just left there like bait or confession. I closed the lid slowly. My throat was dry. I poured myself water from the old carafe we kept by the studio sink. The glass shook slightly in my hand. I could still hear her voice saying, "That sink's too old to trust," from years ago. A knock at the front door startled me. I froze. Then, through the stained glass of the hallway, I saw a courier walk away, leaving a slim parcel. I opened the door and picked it up. The label read, "To R.G. Studio Materials, care of Alyssa Rinsley." So this wasn't just a collaboration. It was a continuation of something she'd started long before she locked that sunroom. I didn't shout. I didn't call her. I didn't even cry. Instead, I stood there in the foyer, one hand on the carved newel post we restored together years ago. I traced the groove in the wood. It had always reminded her of a violin's neck. Funny, she never played an instrument, but she used to hum while she worked, sometimes so softly it felt like a private melody meant only for the air between us. That music had long stopped. As I leaned the parcel against the studio door, I noticed something I hadn't before: faint fingerprints in charcoal along the frame. 2 sets. One small, familiar. The other, broader, recent. I stood at the edge of the sunroom's threshold, not crossing over. The door was ajar, not locked this time, just slightly pushed in, as if left open on purpose. Alyssa was inside, her back to me, adjusting the angle of the canvas. I cleared my throat. She turned. No shock, just stillness. Her hand stayed by her sides, smudged with charcoal. One thumb rubbed anxiously against her forefinger. I stepped in slowly. "I need you to tell me the truth." Her eyes moved, not to meet mine, but to a stack of folded linen cloths on the side table. She reached to cover a half-finished painting, but stopped mid-motion. "How long?" I asked, keeping my voice even. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed again. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, unsteady. It wasn't meant to be hidden. Not like this. "Then why lock the door?" She hesitated. "Because once you see something, you can't unsee it." And I wasn't ready to lose what we still had. I walked over to the covered painting and pulled the cloth aside. A newer piece. Her face, caught in mid-laugh. And beside her, the same faceless man from before. Only now, he had a ring on his finger. A ring that mirrored my own. I looked up at her. "You didn't just paint him. You painted a life I'm not in." She stepped forward slightly. It started after the museum furlough. I felt small, like everything I'd ever been proud of was boxed up and stored away. He asked about my work. He listened, and I didn't. "You measured everything." You fixed what was broken. I didn't want to be restored, Nathan. I wanted to feel new. My fingers tightened around the edge of the easel. So this wasn't about love. This was about someone watching you work. No, it was about someone not watching me disappear. Silence stretched between us, long, brittle. Then a ping broke through, the buzz of her phone. We both glanced at it. A message lit up the screen. Can't wait to see your pieces on display. RG. I stepped back. You're going to exhibit them? I was going to tell you. When? After the opening. It's not a public gallery, she said quickly. It's a private viewing. I needed to know if they were ready. If I was. The word ready landed heavily. I thought we were building a life, I said. Turns out, you were sketching a way out. A breeze moved through the cracked window, lifting one of the linen curtains. Dust floated in the shaft of light. Do you hate me now? She asked. Her voice was flat. No, I answered, but I don't think you see me anymore. I'm the quiet room you walk past now. She looked like she wanted to speak, then lowered her head. From outside, I heard the sound of Lenny's truck pulling into the side alley. Unexpected grounding. He'd said he'd drop off that stone core sample today. I didn't move. I need time, I said. She nodded. You'll take the house? I don't know yet. What do I tell people? That's your choice. I turned to leave, but paused in the doorway. You said you didn't want to be restored, I said. But not everything broken needs to be discarded. Some things, they just need to be seen clearly. She didn't respond. I walked out through the kitchen, past the drying cups and the unopened mail. Outside, the late sun pressed low against the brick. That night, I lay in bed on the far side of the house. A quiet message from Lenny arrived. What matters more now? The home, or your name carved in its stone. I didn't go into the sunroom right away. It had been empty for weeks. Her brushes, her canvases, her presence gone. But that morning, something tugged at me. Maybe it was the filtered light slanting in through the curtains, or maybe I just needed to see it one last time before I let it go. The air smelled faintly of turpentine and linen, ghosts of her process. Everything was orderly, too orderly, as if staged. But then I noticed it. On the wide sill beneath the southern window sat a small bundle, wrapped in a square of canvas. I approached it slowly, as if it might shift or vanish. I unwrapped it with careful hands. Inside was one of her brushes. The bristles were stiff, frozen mid-motion with dried pigment. No note, no flourish, just the brush. She'd left it there knowing I'd understand. Not as a plea, not as an apology, but as punctuation, a full stop. I stood there a while, the brush cradled in my palm like a relic. Then I wrapped it back up and placed it in the drawer of my workbench. Some things don't need interpretation. They just are. But the silence didn't last. Later that afternoon, Alyssa returned. She didn't knock, just walked through the garden gate, like always, carrying a thin portfolio under her arm. She stood at the threshold of the studio, the sun at her back. I just want the studio, she said. Nothing else. I'm not here to fight. Her voice was calmer than I expected. Not pleading, just firm. I looked at her, then at the space around us. The sunroom was never mine. Not really. I had built the beams and sealed the floor, but the air in here had always belonged to her. We moved to the kitchen. I poured us both tea, though neither of us drank it. She spoke first. I'll remove my name from the deed, she said. You can keep the house. I'll take my work and the sunroom. That's all. It was a fair offer, but fair doesn't mean painless. That night, I called Lenny, told him everything. He asked, what can you live with, Nathan? Will keeping the house feel like a win or a wound? I didn't answer right away. I sat with the silence, with the soft tick of the clock over the mantel, with the ache of memory in every corner of that home. The next morning, I walked the perimeter of the courtyard alone. Ivy curled along the old bricks. In one corner, a patch of crocuses Alyssa once planted had bloomed out of season. I knew then I wouldn't fight her. I proposed we split quietly. She would take the sunroom, her tools, her canvases. I'd keep the rest. No legal drama. No public explanations. The next day, she moved the last of her things. When I returned home that evening, the sunroom was mostly bare, but something was waiting. On the wide sill beneath the window, the same brush I had found before, this time laid bare. Bristles hardened, handle stained. No note, just the brush. I picked it up, held it a moment, and placed it gently into the drawer of my workbench. Not everything broken has to be restored. I closed the sunroom door quietly behind me, and let it be the last time. The townhouse felt different now. Not empty exactly, just quieter in a way that no longer pressed on the ribs. The kind of silence that follows a long-held breath. The divorce papers were finalized 2 weeks ago. Alyssa kept the studio. I kept the house. It was an unspoken agreement. Clean lines. No ceremony. Just signatures and a mailbox flag lifted like a white flag. The first few mornings, I sat at the kitchen table longer than usual, drinking coffee that had no one to get cold for. I began fixing things I'd ignored. The cabinet hinge, the garden gate. The courtyard was wild with ivy again, but I didn't mind. One Saturday, Lenny showed up with a toolbox and a bottle of peach cider. "It's time we worked on something that doesn't crumble under pressure," he said. We rebuilt the old bench by the fountain. Our hands moved without much talk. But when he laughed at a splintered board, I found myself laughing too. Not because it was funny, but because it was allowed. The real test came 2 months later. I walked into the community exhibit hall for a conservators' roundtable. I didn't know she'd be there. Alyssa, sitting beside a local patron, gesturing toward a painted panel from her new collection. She didn't notice me at first. Then she did. She stood, hesitated, and stepped away from her table. We met near a display of antique woodwork, just the two of us, surrounded by layers of time and polish. "You look well," she said. "I am. And you?" She nodded. "Getting there." A pause. "I hope the house is treating you kindly." I let the moment hang, then said it plainly. "You took my trust, but not my future." She didn't argue. She only looked down, then offered the smallest of smiles, a complicated one. Regret maybe, or simply recognition. That night I walked home. The air was crisp, the kind that carries sound cleanly. I could hear wind brushing the ivy. Somewhere, a wind chime swayed. I didn't feel broken. I felt unfinished. And that was better. Back at the workshop, I hung a new sign. Weekend classes resumed soon. I had plans. Not to forget, but to shape something from what remained. The next morning, I found a thank you card in the mailbox. No return name. Inside, a short note, for teaching that preservation can start within. I didn't recognize the handwriting, but the message that I understood perfectly. I poured coffee into a warm mug. The courtyard was still overgrown, the bench solid beneath me. The sound of birds, distant conversation, and my own breath settling. And just like that, the world felt workable again. A year had passed. Charleston's air was warm with salt and magnolia. I was walking through a community garden where I now volunteered on weekends, repainting benches, restoring old trellises, making space for new things to grow. The clink of watering cans, the rustle of bags, the quiet rhythm of hands in soil. It all felt honest in a way life hadn't for a long time. I didn't expect to see her there. Alyssa stood near a temporary display of mixed media pieces, her name printed on a small sign, A. Marlowe. Her maiden name. She looked different, less curated. Her hair was pulled back simply, her dress linen and wrinkled from the heat. No entourage, no exhibition tone. Just her. Alone. We didn't approach each other right away. I walked the garden path. She adjusted one of the frames. Eventually, we met in the middle. "Hi, Nathan." Her voice held the same softness I remembered, but with something weathered behind it. "Hey," I said. "It's a good space for your work." She smiled faintly. It's all I could manage. After everything, I didn't respond. There was no bitterness, only a strange calm. She nodded toward a piece on the easel. Abstract, layered strokes in ochre and charcoal. "It's called After the Brush." There was no apology in her words, but there was something like admission. She didn't ask me how I was. She didn't need to. It was written in the way I stood. "I heard about the pavilion exhibit," she said. "Your sculptures. The reviews." I nodded. "It's been grounding." A pause. Then she looked me straight in the eye. I never thought silence could be so loud. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. She offered a tired smile. "Anyway, I hope your quiet is the good kind now." "It is." And just like that, we parted. No drama. No performance. Just two people who once knew each other well, then not at all, and now, perhaps, a little differently again. That night, I returned home and stepped into my studio. The evening light was fading through the tall window, gilding the limestone bust I'd been working on. I took off my gloves and reached for a cloth, smoothing the final bit of dust from the cheek. I named it Still, not because nothing had changed, but because I had. Some pieces aren't meant to be put back together. They're meant to be understood, then left to rest.